Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. This is the final episode of 2024. I'm Paul John Dykes. Today I'm joined by Liam Carrigan, dialing in all the way from Japan. And what a year it's been, Liam. 2024, Celtic, utter domination of the Scottish game. 3 trophies won in that calendar year, 2 defeats. You look at this season, Schmeichel's let in 4 goals in the league. We are absolutely trailblazing at the moment. People will hit you with cliches this week, Liam. Form goes out the window and all this kind of stuff when we're going into a derby game, etc., etc. But it is hard when we're in such a rich vein of form and there's that momentum and that confidence and that bounce that it's hard to see us coming away from Ibrox with anything other than a win at the moment.
I mean, I'll say the same thing I've been consistently saying for the last couple of weeks. There is no reason based in logic that suggests anything other than a win for us. Friends I have who are of that persuasion say like, oh, we're due a win and it can't go on forever and it goes in cycles. Okay, but what basis do you actually have for any of that? And they don't have an answer, because there is no answer. If we play like we should, we win comfortably. If we play slightly below par, we should still win comfortably. The only way it doesn't happen is if we have an absolute shocker and they play out of their skins.
And of course, there's a few dodgy decisions. Now, I'll come back to that because not that long ago we were being told, Liam, about this, and they've obviously picked it up from somewhere, who knows where, this pattern of assistance that was benefiting Celtic and was against Rangers. I heard the words corruption being used. I heard the words cheating being used. Liam Carrigan, Frank Connor's life was made a misery of on the back of all this nonsense. Yet, we have a look at the VAR outcomes, the most recent VAR outcomes. And what do we learn? Well, we learn what we already knew about Yang's penalty. It was a penalty all day long. Stuart Kettlewell stopped chucking the toys at the pram. But then he threw the toys at the pram again the following week, and rightly so, because Butland punched the ball in the net and the OG should have stood. Does that mean that we still have corruption in the Scottish game, Liam? Is there still cheaters in the Scottish game who are hell-bent on burying Rangers?
Well, I would just like to praise Motherwell for doing the decent thing and giving their statement right of the Christmas holidays off, Because no doubt he will have a statement penned and ready to go next Monday,
There's probably, there's already templates made up, Liam, for such scenarios. And it's just basically send. Whoever's in charge of that day, that week, sign it, send it. There you go. But there we are. And I mean, we were hearing of that. And big, massive praise to Alan Morrison, who has been covering the story of refereeing in Scottish football for some time. And it goes back to the very first point you made this afternoon in relation to evidence-based, an evidence-based approach. I'll get back into that when I look at Kyogo. I threw out the wee question the other day there because it was great to see him getting back on the score sheet with a couple of goals. And I threw out the question, can he score his 100th goal for Celtic this season? He's got 17 to go. But then when you dig in, and this was prompted by Alan Morrison making the point, when you dig into the form of Kyogo, you need to look at Kyogo under Brendan and Kyogo under Ange. And I think I've got the figures here actually, the Ange version of Kyogo, and obviously different roles, different wingers, all that kind of thing. The Ange version of Kyogo would score 19 goals between now and the end of the season if we play 29 games. But the form he has shown under Brendan Rodgers would show that he would score 11 goals. So the 17 might be beyond his grasp, Liam. But that's the difference between having an opinion and saying, oh yeah, he can score them, and then actually digging it into the minutiae of the detail and the data. And that's what Alan Morrison has done, and he's done it for a number of years. In the early years of Celtic by Numbers, he used to come on to Celtic, A Celtic State of Mind, and we had a wee show called A Celtic State of Mind, where he would sometimes blow your mind, actually, with some of the stats. He would tell you who the best defender was, and you wouldn't quite believe him, and all this kind of stuff, Liam. But what he did is he was looking at the decisions for and against largely Celtic and Rangers. And obviously that was during a time when Rangers were not conceding penalties. You're talking, what was it, 75 games. They were on the verge of a world record because they like breaking world records, world's best.
Funny how that was the one record that they weren't in a rush to claim,
Honestly, though, I seen a wee graphic this morning, and it was that infamous advert for the Loudon Tavern when they were going to celebrate 10 in a row. You'll remember in the late 90s. And I just noticed, first time I noticed it, the greatest pub in the world. And I'm like, it goes back to the conversation I had with Acsom yesterday about superiority and having this superiority complex. Liam. It's not about being the best. Like I look at sports people who train so hard for whatever sport they're competing in. And I look at boxers largely because I'm always blown away with the commitment of the boxer. Jack Turner was on This Is Acsom just the other week there, and hopefully we can get a few more in. I love to know, the psychology behind it. But they're training to be the best, the optimum they can possibly attain. It's nothing about superiority. You know what I mean? It's about looking after yourself, making sure you can be the best you possibly can be, and you can repay all these people who have had faith in you. And in Celtic's case, it's a fan base, isn't it? So I do think there's a massive difference between attaining the best possible result and being the best you can be, and having the superiority complex of best boozer in the world or most successful football club in the world, Liam. And you know what? I don't think it fares them well. I don't think it's good for them, Liam.
I mean, the Loudon's not even the best pub in that street, let's be honest.
I love the Tommy Burns story about the Loudon when he suggested that they nipped in for a pint. That was just vintage Tommy Burns. No, but this is going into a game of football where you will hear all the cliches. You'll hear them all in the commentary leading up to the game. I'm pretty sure they'll be getting rolled out in the phone-ins and in the Scottish press, etc. But let's talk data. Let's talk information and evidence, Liam, because it doesn't really, for me, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up when you've got a Celtic side who, by the way, people might point out, but we weren't great the other week against Dundee United. I think there was mitigating circumstances around that performance and that result. Largely, you're playing a second-string defence virtually. And also, your main man isn't playing on the wing to create chances for you. So, and the weather was rotten as well for both teams. But no, I don't see that happening, Liam. But I want to focus on quite a few aspects going into the game. Yesterday, we more or less dedicated an entire show to the repercussions. What happens next? What if Celtic go out there and we absolutely trounce them like we did in the first Glasgow derby of this season, and we beat them comfortably, and we do it in their own patch in front of their own fans exclusively? What happens then? Because I'm already sensing the mother of all meltdowns if that was to be the case. But where do they go? This is the thing, Liam. Where do they go from here? I
mean, it kind of flashes back to I remember in 2012 when the original Rangers died, and a friend of mine who he's a Rangers supporter, but he's not a bigot, whatever. He likes his football, And he said, "What can we do? What can we do?" And I said, the first thing you need to do is drop this "we are the people" nonsense, right? Just drop the Supremacy Act.
Yep.
And show a bit of humility. Get young players in, build it up slowly, and see if it takes you five or 6 years to get back to the top flight. Fine. But that's what you should have done. And they didn't, because of that entitlement, that belief that it's their God-given right to be number one. And I was talking about this on Celtic Down Under yesterday, actually. If you look at the history of it, okay, when were Rangers last dominant? The 90s.
Yeah.
All bought with money they didn't have.
Yeah.
Right? When was the period before that when they had any sort of dominance? I mean, 70s, we were winning 9 in a row. You can back to probably you can back to late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
Was the last time that when it was a level playing field, they were ahead. And that's notwithstanding the fact that they were probably getting every dodgy refereeing decision under the sun then as well. It's just a fact of the matter. We are a bigger club than Rangers, and both incarnations. And if it's a level playing field, we are clearly on top. And this is what they don't get. This is what their fans don't get now. We are so far ahead of them in terms of the structure of the club, the money we're generating, the sponsorship deals we're getting, the crowds that we're bringing in. We are ahead of them on every metric and on the football pitch as well.
Yeah.
And it's because we are a bigger club than they are. And that is something they will never accept. But it is the facts. I mean, as the great physicist Neil deGrasse Tyson says, the great thing about science is it's true whether you believe it or not.
This is what we're getting at, isn't it? We're opening up the show talking about evidence-based info, going into the game thinking, right, it's not about going in there and thinking to yourself that you're superior to anyone. It's just looking at the form, looking at the quality of the side, also looking at the managers. Liam, I think that's huge going into this. The mindset of the managers going into this game is absolutely massive. But you make a great point there, because I think, and by the way, again, you might have the evidence having worked in that industry, but I think that, you know, Rangers peaked during their 9 in a row, probably at the time where the Scottish newspaper business peaked. I mean, in terms of sales. I remember seeing things like the Sunday Mail were shifting a million copies every Sunday. That's nuts. That's unbelievable sales, right? And obviously there were other newspapers competing with them, etc. But at that time, they had a massive amount of influence because of that. And the Rangers leading media at that time, Liam, had the Rangers fan base believing this was always the case. We were always superior to Celtic, you know, and looking down their nose at Celtic. But when you look at the facts, you're 100% right. Now, I had a wee look at this. So from the first season that Jock Stein took over at Celtic, 1965, obviously, won the Scottish Cup, right up to the arrival of Graham Souness at Ibrox. Rangers won 17 trophies in 21 years, right? So that's the period you're talking about. That period where Jock Stein comes in, Celtic dominate. Yeah, we taper off. You know, you've got the emerging Aberdeen and Dundee United coming into it, a strong Hearts side coming into it as well. And Graham Souness takes over. And at that point, in that 21-year period, they've won 17 trophies. Now, if you wanted to say, right, from this point, let's go 21 years back and let's combine the trophies, because people like doing that. Let's combine the trophies. Both versions of Rangers, 13 domestic trophies in the last 21 years. Now, we know there was a liquidation event. We know that. And when you're looking at that, they've had less success in that period than they did in the last doldrum period. But what they had in their back pocket at that time, when Souness took over, was everything that then mapped out in terms of the misuse of finances, EBT, side letters, etc., 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 which ultimately culminated in the demise of the football club. They don't have that now. And this is the thing that people will have to realise and have to accept, Liam. There is no get out. There's no cheat code this time.
No.
So your 13 trophies in 21 years, which was worse than the 17 and 21, which prompted you to then tap into every possible, legal or otherwise, mode of income, is no longer available. And this is what we were talking about yesterday. What next? Because, yeah, it's one game of football. And even if the unthinkable happens and Celtic go out and get beat, Celtic will still win the league. This is the point. But what next for them? What next for this rivalry within Scottish football, which has already been diluted by the absence of away supporters in the stadium? And that's something that, by the way, could backfire monumentally on Thursday to Rangers if Celtic go out there and play to the peak of our powers, which I don't think we have done a lot of the time against this Rangers side since Rodgers came back in. But Liam, this is the thing. Is the realisation setting in? Because if it is, you'll be looking at empty seats next season at Ibrox Stadium, because that realisation that they're not competing, and it's not just a one-off, and it's not going to flip with the change of a manager. This is generational dominance. We're going into 2025. It won't be long before we're saying 25 years since we appointed Martin O'Neill. And in that period, you look at the domination of Celtic Football Club in that 25 years. It is astonishing. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say 43 trophies. I could be wrong. Unbelievable domination.
It's around that area, definitely.
It's incredible. So what happens next then? Because there's only so much the propaganda machine can make people believe something until they say, wait a minute, I'm not seeing the evidence here.
What I would say is that it is dangerous to underestimate the power of propaganda, because for the last, 10 years, about 12 years, we have basically been gaslit into thinking that there is still a rivalry.
Yeah.
Right? We've been taught they're coming, and the James Webb Space Telescope couldn't see them coming at the moment, But the fact is that rivalry, even when it did exist in the 90s, early 2000s, it was artificial, because it was created by a financial climate that was not real, right? there has not been a genuine rivalry, in my opinion. There has not been a genuine rivalry between Celtic and Rangers since the early 80s. That was the last time it was a genuine rivalry that wasn't propped up either by false money or media spin.
An authentic rivalry, Liam. Absolutely.
Yeah. And any semblance of an actual rivalry, to me, as most people would say, just died in 2012, because that was when Rangers ceased to be this sort of reanimated corpse of a club that now plays at Ibrox is not Rangers, because that Rangers would have been able to challenge us. And
the reanimated corpse. You always come up with terms that takes me back to video nasties for the 1980s. That was a movie at one point, wasn't it? I could almost picture the front cover of it, Liam. But this is the thing, right? Because you're talking about propaganda there, and people might be watching this, tuning in to Acsom. And by the way, big shout out to everybody who has tuned in. Some of the figures we've had over the last couple of weeks have been phenomenal. We had like 2,500 live yesterday, peaking at 15,000 on the YouTube channel on that one episode. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Big plans for 2025. Liam's a massive part of that next year as well, and you'll see all these developments on Acsom giving you as much value and quality as we can possibly produce. But when we're looking at a propaganda machine, somebody who might just be casually tapping into this show today, Liam, going, God almighty, Celtic fans still talking about 2012 liquidation, zombies, etc. Well, yes, and I think you've got to. And I think it's kicking back against this propaganda machine, Liam, because if you allow them to set the narrative, this is the same club. They were demoted. This is all the nonsense that you hear, right? And that is why they were clinging on to the most successful club, because it allowed them to combine both sets of trophies. Both sets of trophies, 3 plus whatever they won before, right? What would it be, 115, shared or otherwise? And they combine them all together just so that they can say, we are the same club. And they're feeding that narrative. Now, we're getting into a scenario now. I'm going to bring it up from Jungle Line. Imagine every single season when you set your goals, because as a fan, I always think to myself, right, what are we going to achieve this year? Jungle Lion nails it. Their only focus now is stopping Celtic winning the treble. Now, imagine every season, Liam, that was your focus. Imagine every season. We're about to cash in on a player, Alexandro Bernabe. Where is he in the pecking order if he's at Celtic Park, right? He's behind Baez, behind Taylor. He's at least third choice left back. And if the reports are to be believed, because of his performances in Brazil, and well done to him for going over there, he's obviously suited to that style of football, that climate, that environment, Liam. And he's not in Scotland. So go and have a great career. Hopefully get capped and all the rest of it, right? But we're about to cash in on him to the tune of 6 or 7 million quid. And Rangers sold 4 players, it might have been more, for 800 grand in the summer. So it's not a flex. It's not a financial flex. It's just where we are, basically, compared to where Rangers are in the financial food chain. And, certain things happen throughout a season. And one of them was you go into a League Cup final and you believe, and the propaganda machine, which is becoming a theme on today's show, makes the fans believe that they've been hard done by. And that's the reason that Celtic won that League Cup. And there's no insight. There's no reflection. There's no looking within and saying, why did we lose this? Where are our deficiencies? Because I keep saying this. Remember 1992, Celtic were rotten, absolutely rotten. And the future was bleak at that time because we didn't have a board with the business acumen, Liam, to build us the new stadium that we needed to build. We needed to have an all-seater stadium on the back of the Taylor report. It had to happen, right? We didn't have the board who were capable of doing that. We no longer had this conveyor belt of young talent that we used to sell off every time we needed a few quid. Going right back to the 60s and Davy Hay, Lou McCarry, Kenny Dalglish, Charlie Nicholas. We didn't really have that. No one was being produced. So we were in a real quandary. We were in a real moment where it could have gone either way, and we know which way it did go. But 25 years before that, we had won the European Cup. It was self-harm, Liam, and we knew it was self-harm. We had been run terribly as a football club. But we looked inwards and we sorted out. As a fan base, the Celtic supporters around about that time, and I was a youngster, right? But I did... what part did I play? I bought the fanzines. I think that was the part I played. I wasn't old enough to be going to the different talks by Celts for Change and Save Our Celts, etc. But I was fully invested in it, Liam. But the Celtic fans, they galvanised themselves and they looked within and they were able to make a kind of street movement. They then started working with the guys like David Lowe and Fergus McCann, and they were able to boycott games systematically. They were able to then go to the bank and say, look, Celtic need this amount of people in the stadium to break even week on week. And this is how much they had last week, because Matt McGlone and his team had the clickers outside the turnstiles, counting the fans, because you knew what Celtic used to do. Have a look about, all right, 36,000. And then they would report back, etc. So the fan movement, the galvanisation of the Celtic support in that period, in 1994, in that period, Rangers don't have it. They don't have the capability to look within, Liam. It's always, it's the SFA, it's Celtic, it's the media. I've heard it all. Everybody's against Rangers. So they'll never ever fix it.
No, and that's the difference. When it mattered, our fans came together and we saved our club. We got the people in place that needed to be there, Fergus, Brian Dempsey, etc. They were there because they had the backing of the fans, and we got the change that was needed to save the club. And we got the new stadium, and it took a few years, right? That was 94. It was another 4 years before we won a title.
Yeah.
And then it was probably another couple of years after that before we were consistently winning titles. It was probably about a 5 to 10 year plan that Fergus had, and we got fortunate that it paid off a wee bit earlier than that. But that was always the plan, and the fans knew that. I started going to Celtic games in '92, so it was round about that time that I was too young to really be involved in what was going on. I was only like 10 years old at the time, but I was old enough to understand what was happening, and you could see it. Celtic fans were totally united in what we had to do. And we we organised, we did, those meetings, Celts for Change, etc. We got Celtic fans that had the right financial, not just the money, but also the wisdom to use that money in its best possible way to rebuild the club. Whereas with Rangers, it's protests, it's fascist style marches on Ibrox, it's waving misspelled banners. That's not going to get you anywhere. That's not how you save your club, and that is why we have an unbroken history and they don't. And as a couple of people in the comments have mentioned, why do we keep talking about it? Because the media won't, and we have to remind them, because Rangers died, we know they died, and the worst part for them is they know that we know they died, and we have to keep reminding them of that.
Yeah, and if anybody is asking why, I think it's because we've seen just in the last few weeks how that attitude and that approach still exists, Liam. And it's all about the protection of Rangers. It really is. I mean, I seen a post recently about some of the propaganda that had come out in the last 12 months, talking up Rangers players so that they hope they can boost the value of said players so that they can actually make a sale or two and make a few quid to keep the lights on. So it does have to be called out, because prior to the advent, I guess, of what I used to call alternative or rebel media back in the days of fanzines, because it was, it was proper rebel media. That was the only way. And it was very underground, Liam. It was very underground, that kind of like fan conversation on the page. You weren't getting that, because even, phone-ins are filtered and all that kind of stuff. The hotline that was printed in the Sunday Mail, for example, everything was filtered, Celtic were guilty of it as well. They used to write their own letters to the letters page, the board of directors, with pseudonyms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, what a great job the board are doing. Cambuslang, what an idea that is. And it was absolute nonsense, and it's propaganda. So the reason that we're calling it out is because the whole advent, I think, of fan media is due to the fact that we need to have a platform where we call it out. And just a few weeks ago, we were hearing about it, and how, it was incredible that a game refereed by John Beaton was being put under focus in relation to some kind of bias against Rangers. Come on, I'll tell you something though, and this is where it leads. Right, it leads to Thursday at Ibrox, and it leads to the officials walking out on that park under more pressure than they would be. Right, so this is the biggest game in Scottish football, other than a cup final between the two clubs. A league game between Celtic and Rangers, right? So if you're refereeing it or if you're assistant VAR, whatever, you're part of that team, there's a huge amount of pressure. But that's ramped up, Liam, deliberately ramped up by the pressure. I mean, how many times did we see that still of Liam Scales with the jersey pull? How many times was that poured over? Did we see the same level of scrutiny for Yang getting sent off at Tynecastle in one of only 2 games that Celtic lost in 2024? Nowhere near it. So that's why we're having to call it out. We will be digging into the Celtic team and who we think should be playing on Thursday, because I think there's a few conversations. January kicks off tomorrow. That's scary. January kicks off tomorrow, so we will be talking about some of the players that we've been linked to as well, and we'll have a wee look ahead to Ibrox. Let us know in the comments section in relation to the power of the media. How's it changed? A lot of you now get your own media, let's say from the Celtic News aggregator site, Celtic News Now, phenomenal source, an absolutely incredible source, and from Celtic fan media, for example, and other sources of fan media, and how that's going to look in 5-10 years. I think what has to happen, Liam, is I think fan media needs to also up our game in respect to the quality that we provide. And that's what Acsom are trying to do, because if you do want to go toe-to-toe, and when you look at some of the figures that we're getting, you absolutely are going toe-to-toe with these big corporations with big budgets, then you need to improve the quality all the time, constantly evolve. And I think in 5 years' time, it's going to be a very interesting landscape. And I don't think there will be such a thing as the terminology of fan media or legacy media. It'll just be media, good or bad. Good or bad media. That's what it'll come down to.
I mean, again, there's statistical evidence for it, right? You look at Acsom, you look at other Celtic channels, you look at other Rangers supporter channels and all. Look at the numbers they had 5 years ago and look at the numbers they have now.
Yeah.
Right? Fans of all clubs are like sick and tired of just being fed one side of a narrative in the media. And the other side to that is that as we are going up, they're going down. The traditional media is going down. The Daily Record, I believe their circulation is now under 50,000.
Oh, I think the last figure I saw was 90. That's astonishing.
But it's been heading steadily downward. Might not be quite as low as 50,000 yet, but it's getting that way. The Herald is now a tenth of what it was when I worked there as a copy boy, and that was only in 2001. Mm-hmm. So that's only 23 years ago. And they've lost 90% of their readership in that time. And the record's probably similar, because even if they are hovering around 80, 90,000, as you said before, they used to sell close to 1 million.
Yeah.
So they've lost 90%, and that's no sustainable. Doesn't matter what numbers you're dealing in, you cannot lose 90% of your customer base and continue to function. What I think might happen is that these guys will go, these papers, whatever, will probably go online. I mean, if you look in England, The Guardian is already kind of doing that. They still have a print edition, but most people now who are Guardian readers subscribe to the website rather than buy the paper, right? I don't know if Scottish media has the forward thinking to adapt that way, because from what I know of the people who are in charge at these papers, they don't have the forward thinking, and they still think that people like us are a nuisance that are just going to disappear.
I know.
But the trend is clearly leaning towards fan-led content.
Yeah.
Writing, speaking, presenting, radio, everything. It's all leading towards fan content. Because here's the thing. When we talk about Celtic, right? Now, if I say something stupid, the commenters will very quickly call me out on it, right? And they'll say, you're talking nonsense, right? But they know they're getting nonsense from one of them. They know that what we say might not be what they agree with. It might be wrong, but we will speak authentically. Whereas when you click onto the Daily Ranger and it's like, this is the Rangers news, this is the Celtic news, and it's clearly artificially being sort of, how should I say, it's being punted towards a certain demographic, a certain fan base. Thanks, Monty, in the comments. That just reminded me. Yes, I am indeed talking pish as usual. But
the honesty of our commenters shines through, Liam. Honestly,
Aye.
there is no filter. There is no filter.
No,
Oh dear.
but that's the thing. It's like we can have that conversation, right? There is nobody at the Daily Record that you can get in touch with and send a message and say, I disagree with you, and here's why. There isn't that dialogue, and that's the difference. Is every time I come on here, and I say this as a Celtic fan, but also as a journalist. Every time I come on here, I put my face to what I'm saying. I put my name to what I'm saying. When I write articles, my name is there. I don't hide behind this record reporter byline, right?
Exactly.
I'll put my reputation to what I'm saying because I believe it's correct. And
right.
I might well be proven wrong.
No, you might be, but you know what? You can still come back on and explain your side of the argument. The big thing for me, before we dig right into the focus of the game itself, is that in 5 years' time, the landscape will have completely changed. The mainstream, some of which the channels you've already mentioned have already started doing this, will start replicating fan media. They will try to create content that looks like fan media, but it's not. It's still run by a major media company with a huge budget and also an agenda, right? Yeah. So this is a big thing, right? I don't have anything against if you've got a big budget, good on you. Wish I did, right? It's not about the budget, it's the agenda, Liam, like you were talking about. Where can we get the most traction? All right, we'll run a favourable story in that direction. So what will happen is, when it comes to writing in 5 years' time, anything you need to know, you'll be able to get it. You'll probably just ask your phone rather than even type it into the chat programs or Google, and it will tell you the information that you need. Blogging massively will be taken over by AI, and the only blogging channels that will survive that will be the ones who people have bought into, probably through platforms such as this, where they've seen you on the screen, they like your personality, and they want to read what you're writing. And if you've not done that, if you've not done the hard yards on that, Liam, then you're basically just generating AI kind of stuff. All right, there's a story. Brendan Rodgers said this at the press conference. 200 news sources report it within a minute. That's what's going to happen. But what people who actually like reading will do, and not just getting information, because that's just reporting, they'll buy into people who actually write well, and they'll buy into people whose personalities that they've come to like and enjoy through shows like this. So I think that we're always kind of thinking ahead. 2025 is going to be a great year for Acsom. It's going to be a great year for Celtic, and we want to take as many as you as possible on that journey, wherever it takes us. John Sweeney, let's go out on Thursday and show Sevco it will be many years before they are winning the league, and the wilderness years will continue for them. Last week, we spoke to John Higgins, who's potted a ball or two in his time, Liam. And at the end of the show, I kind of try and get a sense of, what is your ambition? I always go back to the old Celtic centenary video. I must rewatch it, right? I've got the old VHS over there with the MP3 thing, so I can convert them. I must rewatch that one, because near the end of the video, it was a BBC production. McElvaney narrated it, you'll remember, right? And this old fan, who they said was Celtic's biggest fan, right? I never knew how you could get such an accolade, but they called him Celtic's biggest fan. And they asked him, in your lifetime, what's your ambition for Celtic? And his answer was, bear in mind, this is 1988, right? Christmas 1988, he says, another 9 in a row. And he says, it's up to the Big Billy and the man upstairs. And that's what he said, right? And here we are, having won another 9 in a row. So I ask the Celtic fans who are on the show and on the channel, and I say, what is your ambition for Celtic? Probably prompted by that wee excerpt on the video. And John Higgins last week said 10 in a row. 10 in a row, he said, right? So you're looking at that, Liam, and you think, all right, so Ange's got us 2, Brendan's got us 1, we're on our way to a 4th. You're already kind of calculating it here. That is a possibility right now. Going back to everything that was said, and this isn't superiority, it's not a complex, it's about Celtic doing things right, and when they're not working, changing them and bringing in somebody better to do the job better, etc. Liam, this is how Celtic have been successful. 10 in a row is a distinct possibility. People think you're mental if you've only won like a third of that at this point. But it is. It's a distinct possibility when you look at where Celtic are and where the nearest challenger is.
Yeah. I mean, if you talk about, as we talked about before with the media, look at where they were 5 years ago and look at where they are now. look at us, where we were 5 years ago, where we are now. Look at Rangers, or whatever they're calling themselves these days, where they are now compared to where they were 5 years ago. They are not any further forward because they did not put in place a long-term plan. Whereas we have consistently looked to get incrementally better. Now, do I agree with everything the board's done? Absolutely not. Do I think our media wing needs a hell of a lot of work to get better? Yes, I do. But you can't deny that Celtic are far better managed than our rivals, which is why we are continuing to widen that gap. And the trend is just getting bigger and bigger. Us, the Tribute Act, we're never going to be on the same plane again. It's not happening.
No,
we are going to keep pulling further and further away. And I mean, they reform once and they call it Sevco. What do they call it when they reform again? Sevco 2?
That's another video nasty.
That's
another video nasty. That's twice you've done that. I've got to say, in all seriousness, I learned yesterday of a young footballer called Ben Williamson, who is from out in the villages in Fife. Actually, he's my auntie's nephew, but not related to me, if you know what I mean. So obviously it's the extended side of it. Ben plays for Hamilton Accies, and he was in a horrible car crash just on, it would have been the early hours of Sunday morning. He was in a horrible car crash and he's in hospital with numerous injuries. 23-year-old up and coming footballer, and you know, you just pray and hope that he makes a full recovery, Liam. Absolutely horrible.
Soon,
absolutely, yeah. Seen him a couple of times last season. He was playing for Partick Thistle, and I seen him up at Hampden playing against Queen's Park. He's got a dig in him. He likes getting in and about people, Liam. You might remember him actually in one of James McCarthy's few appearances for Celtic at Livingston. A young kid was playing for Livingston that day and he smashed him. First thing he did, he smashed James McCarthy.
Oh, aye.
That was Ben. That was young Ben.
Right.
So get well soon, Ben. Get well soon. All the best to you, young man. Let's have a look at some of the comments coming through. Listen, we know it's the last day of the year. Everybody will be getting set up. I don't know how do you celebrate that in Japan, Liam?
Well, as soon as we've finished up here, I've got a nice bottle of sparkling sake down the stair that me and the wife are going to share, and I've got a wee dram which I'm going to have at midnight. I'm going to phone my old man and just toast the new year because you know that's what we always did. And we do have a kind of a meal of sorts. It's no like your beef stew that you get or your steak pie in Scotland. It's like soba noodles and sushi. So
Nice.
that's kind of the way we'll be going. And we're only 2 hours away from that now as we speak. So I'll have a nice wee drink and a wee feed once. But you know, I won't have too much because I do have some work to do tomorrow, as you know.
Yeah, you are the man from the future then. You've only got 2 hours to wait. If you come back to Scotland, Liam, which of the delicacies would you choose if you were doing Hogmanay? Would you go Scottish or Japanese?
Oh no, I would definitely go for the stew and the steak pie, whatever, because it's something you can't really get over here. One of the things that is really hard to get in Japan, which sounds dead simple, is gravy. You can't get gravy anywhere. They use demi-glace, which is all right, but it's not the same. No, a big pot of stew with sausages, carrots, onions, and all that going through it. That's my thing. That's what I want.
There you go. You're missing it. I can tell. I can tell that you're missing that. Paddy Lavery, always an absolute pleasure. And you're changing your avatar on a regular basis. There is a theme though. Afternoon, all from a very windy Arddown. Paddy Lavery is a massive supporter of this channel, and he does some lovely wee things that he'll not talk about. Like we always receive a nice wee Christmas card and all that from at the Arddown boys. So big shout out to you, Paddy, and hopefully you have a great new year, my friend. Gordon Coney, afternoon Acsom. We'd like to wish all the Acsom team and all the listeners a happy new year when it comes in May.
To you, mate.
Absolutely, May 2025 be as dominating for us as 2024 has been. This is what we're talking about. We see no reason why it wouldn't be. And you look at some of the changes that's happening behind the scenes that we're probably not going to see the benefits, the fruits of the labour for a wee while. Bringing in Paul Tisdale, it was a story at the time. Nobody's talking about it now, but he will obviously be working, on a daily basis in relation to recruitment, data, youth development, and everything else within the football department that we have spoken about so many times, Liam. And that's all going to happen. Let's focus now on the team that faces Rangers on Thursday. And a big shout out to Barry O'Sullivan, because every time someone brings in a Masters of the Universe reference, you need to get it right, and you did, Barry. Don't think I've ever been so relaxed going into a Glasgow derby. It's Snake Mountain. Sneak Mountain. Maybe it should be renamed Sneak Mountain, because they're quite sneaky. Can't wait for it. Yeah, there we go. Thursday. I cannot wait either. We talk about goalkeepers at Celtic. You and I had a really good discussion about where Schmeichel sits in the kind of list of modern Celtic greats between the sticks. And week on week, he's just improving on that. What about his passing at the weekend? And it didn't have to do any goalkeeping. He didn't have to make any saves. But his passing was tremendous. Standing midway up in his own half, collecting a ball from one of his defenders, sometimes a midfielder, and then finding a pass to the wing. Liam, it's a dynamic that we didn't have prior to Schmeichel being here. It's
something that he's clearly learned from his dad. Peter Schmeichel was the absolute master of that. Just getting the ball. He would throw a pass 60 yards and not even think about it.
He was unbelievable with his throws. I mean, it was like a pass. Unbelievable.
Aye. And Casper's definitely got that part of his game. And I tell you what, he could go up our list of all-time Celtic goalkeepers if and when he saves the penalty on Thursday,
I know,
because we know they're going to get one. Let's be honest, right? We know they're going to get one.
This goes back to the initial discussion about propaganda and what is the result of propaganda? There is a result. Every action creates a reaction. There is a result, and sometimes that result is that the officials are put under so much pressure that they start making the wrong decision. Now that goes into the unconscious area of decision making, doesn't it? I mean, it's already there. The pressure, the outcome. What if I'm the next referee that's going to get threatened? What if my address is going to be published online, as it has done in the past with referees in Scotland? And then you've made a decision. You've made a decision before you even consider it. And this is a frustration. So absolutely, if there is a penalty kick to be taken, hopefully the big man. I've read a stat, and I need to check this. I don't know how true this is. Schmeichel saves 1 in 4 penalties throughout his career. Now, he's played over 750 games, club level, and he's played 111 times for Denmark. Now, I'm pretty sure he's faced quite a few penalties, but I've seen that stat. I'd like to check that, actually. 1 in 4. That's a tremendous return for a goalkeeper, Liam. And I would be pretty confident, actually. It's unbelievable. I'd be really confident. I mean, he'd need to clear the goalmouth of glass before he was diving anywhere, obviously. Brendan McCarthy, this is mental, but I still have the 90s fear going into these games. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, Liam, is some people, and I get it, I totally get it, will be hearing this discussion and saying, but you are kind of behaving a wee bit triumphalist. You are being a wee bit kind of superior. And I don't think so. I think there's the flip side of that is that there's a number of Celtic fans who don't like getting ahead of ourselves, Liam, right? And I totally get it. And it's almost as if you're tempting fate. A lot of people are like, right, okay, we'll deal with that, but let's not get overconfident.
But this is the thing, though. It's about the general trend. One result isn't all that important in the grand scheme of things. Now, like I said, in the next 48 hours, we are going to be told by TV, newspapers, all mainstream media that this is like the most important football game that's ever been played, right? Rangers could win 5-0 and they still wouldn't get close to winning the league, right? That's the reality of it. So ultimately, this is a game of little relevance in the grand scheme of things. Now, you always want to beat them, especially at Snake Mountain, whenever you can. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, because the trend is that we are better, and we are going to be better unless they radically change how they operate as a club. And I don't believe that either their fans or the people in charge there have the humility to do that.
Right. Let's go back then to 94. Fergus McCann came in, and I've never had I would love to speak to Fergus McCann. He's on a bucket list of interviewees that I would love to sit down and talk to, but it's never happened yet. But I have spoken to a lot of people who were really close to Fergus, and I've spoken to people like David Lowe, for example, Tom Grant, who was the one remaining board member from the old regime, who Fergus McCann kept on, spoke to Tom, and Jock Brown, who obviously worked as the GM at the time. He was a general manager, wasn't he, at Celtic, under Fergus, as well as other people who worked at the club when he was there. And the one big thing that frustrated a lot of Celtic fans at the time, and it resulted in the booing, was the fact that he had a business plan first and a football plan second. And he knew that the second one would follow the first. And it became frustrating, to the point where the three amigos, you think about the time and how time has been very, very kind to certain people. The booing, people can't imagine booing Fergus McCann now. People are telling me, there needs to be a statue. You need to name the stadium after Fergus and all this kind of stuff. So time has been a great healer in that respect. But the flip side of that is the three amigos were absolutely lauded and loved by the Celtic support. Liam, loved. And when they weren't signing new contracts, when they were leaving the club, Fergus McCann got the stick for that. But he was doing it from a business perspective at that stage, whereas as fans, we were looking at that thinking, we've got to stop the 10. We have got to stop this steamroller from happening. And these are the types of players. This is the type of quality we need. And you're selling them. And that was where the frustration came in. But he had that plan that is non-existent at the moment at Rangers. And even when he was under supreme pressure to deliver a contract that kept Paolo Di Canio at the football club, he didn't do it. Because he knew long-term, it wasn't what was best for the football club. And he was right. He was 100% right. We stopped the 10. And what happens? Janssen leaves. There were so many things that as fans we were frustrated with at that time, Liam. But he had the laser focus, and that can often make you unpopular, can't it? To have that focus. Yeah. But he was right. Looking back now, he was absolutely right. He might have done things better, slightly better when it comes to the, actually speaking to people in the way that he communicated with certain people, etc. He might have done that side of things better. But the result, I think, is unquestionable. And that is where Rangers will never get into that, because they don't have that 5-6 years of pain for long-term gain. They just won't take the pain. And what will happen is it will compound that pain for years and years and years.
The thing is, we you can talk about like the sliding doors moments, if you like, of Scottish football. And a couple that stand out to me are, like you say, Fergus with our big players at the time, thinking sticking to the plan is more important than appeasing the fans short term, right?
Yeah.
And there were a number of instances where he did that. But then skip forward a few more years. I think it was around 2004, 2005. Brian Quinn was the chairman, and Juninho wanted an EBT, and Brian Quinn was like, no, we are not going down that road. And obviously around the same time, a number of players at Rangers were having the same conversation, and Murray was like, go right ahead. And history tells you who made the right choice there. A lot of people, a lot of Celtic fans probably don't have much time for Brian Quinn, but I think we have to recognise the guy made a very, very astute call there that Celtic are still benefiting from today.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And this is the thing, again, propaganda machine tried to pull Celtic into that EBT discussion back in the day. Juninho had one at Middlesbrough, and we signed them from Middlesbrough. And I think there were payments continued. I would need to check this, but not many. I'm talking fewer than 5 payments continued. And it was, as you say, Brian Quinn that stepped in and says, right, I'm not happy with this. Pay the tax on that, and it stops. And that's exactly what happened. And it was all documented as well. But they tried to drag Celtic into that argument. Oh, but you had EBTs as well. It was one instance which Celtic highlighted and sorted, and we never ever used that ever again. Mantis Toboggan, come on, it's Masters in the Universe. We need to be accurate here. I always thought the Castle Grayskull reference was to do with the aesthetics and surroundings. He-Man Spergs need to calm down. Remember how bad that movie was?
Just see who has the power on Thursday then.
Who has the power? Absolutely. Yeah. Here we go. Monty, the aforementioned. The joy of Christmas, spirit and content. A 14-point gap, no need for lament. Oh, this is a poem. I didn't even realise that. The rhythm was there, Monty. The window upon us and a few movies of intent, the scythe being sharpened for their man Clement. I'm going to say Clement just for the rhyming. There we go, Monty. Well done. Well done. You're a poet.
Well, you know, I can do a bit of that. In brightest day and in blackest night, never forget the Rangers are fundamentally lacking in a number of areas.
Yeah,
Moving on.
fill in the blank, absolutely. Danny boy, I'll be in my scratcher at Hogmanay. Can't stand it, he says. Dearie me. Dearie me. What I would say, Rhiann Downey, Celtic fan, came into the studio. I was recording a series of acoustic sessions with musicians, up and coming and established. And Rhiann Downey at that point came in from Bells Hill. And we had a right good discussion about Celtic not on camera, because at that time, you know, it was one of the things, Liam, a wee bit, you know, cautious to discuss what football teams she supported. And I get that from up and coming artists. Other ones don't care. Rhiann has gone on to incredible things with Paul Heaton, etc. And she is bringing in the bells on BBC One. So big shout out to Rhiann. Danny, if you find yourself awake, tune in. She's a star, an absolute star. Robert Hyland, if Peter Schmeichel's recent comments are anything to go by, Casper will sign for another 10 years. Listen, if we get another year out of him after this one, I will be happy. And you would hope that if that plan was in place with Sinisalo, that within that 2-year period, Liam, we would have a goalkeeper ready to step in. And then you would say, that's a great contingency plan. You would hope that that is the case. By that time, I don't know if Scott Bain will have had a testimonial by this stage. Fewest games ever played for someone with a testimonial. Let's have a wee chat about the defence. We've only got 9 minutes to go here. The defence, I think in many respects, there's two members of that. For me, there's two members of that defensive line who pick themselves in Johnston and Carter Vickers. There's then a discussion around Scales and the left back. Some people might say there's no discussion around Scales and that he is a first pick. How do you line up in the defence, Liam? Is it even a dilemma for you?
Scales and Carter Vickers for me. Trusty's done nothing wrong, but Scales has just been absolutely outstanding in the last couple of weeks, and particularly in an attacking sense. You know, he nearly got that header in the cup final. He's looking dangerous every time we get a set piece. So yeah, he's third name on the team sheet for me after Dyson and Casper.
And again, going back to the propaganda, there have been stories in the last couple of weeks linking him away, a move away for Celtic. And this is something that as a Celtic supporter, you've always seen. You're expecting it leading up to a game against Rangers, you know, something to try and unsettle some aspect of the football club. Cameron Carter-Vickers, last week and at the beginning of this week, I spoke about the fact that we've got a very settled nature to the team at the moment. It doesn't feel as though we're coming to the end of the cycle with Carter-Vickers. I don't feel like that anyway. Liam, what do you reckon?
No, I as I say, I just think that it's a no contest, basically. I just do not see us, no matter what players we put out, I don't see it really having much effect on the result, because I think it's only going to go one way. So really, I just think go with the team that won, that won last week. That's, to me, that's good enough.
So we'll keep Taylor on the bench if that's the case. I think a massive part of that, and the fact that Bailly came in, because I was asking myself before the game against St Johnstone, is it like McGregor and we're resting him, or did Brendan not fancy him in his performance against Rangers in the cup final? And it's probably the latter. And I think Bailly comes in and plays really well as well. To be honest with you, if it goes either way in the left back, neither of the choices would surprise me. They wouldn't surprise me. But I think if Taylor plays, I don't know if he should be overloading the midfield, because we were left exposed quite a few times against Rangers in the cup final. The famous one being Carter-Vickers versus 4, and Carter-Vickers managed to win the ball because he's a colossus. But it's not a situation you want to be in, and we were left exposed. And a lot of that is because we're overloading this inverted fullback, overloading the midfield at that time. Scaldini, absolutely scalesy, Quinny, unbelievable. And I think, Rodgers has spoken about him and pointed out that he's never really seen a case like Scales in his football career. And he's just going from strength to strength. I would say, though, he probably needs a trim. I don't think he suits the Italian hairstyle because the colour doesn't really go, does it?
He could have his hair dyed bright pink and purple for all I care if he scores the winner at Thursday.
That would be interesting. Yeah, why not? Midfield then, Engels. We were banging on it. We were banging a drum about Engels actually, even when he wasn't getting in the side, saying that this is a player who is developing pretty well. I kept going on to the Champions League assists. Yesterday, I found this really interesting as well. That and I know it's only half a season, but in terms of goals and assists, he is creating them more consistently, more regularly than Matt O'Reilly did last season. And people might say in the comments, "You're talking rubbish," but seriously, he has scored or created a goal this season, Arnie Engels, every 103 minutes. And you look at that vintage campaign of O'Reilly last season, big games, big goals, and consistently throughout the campaign, I've got to say. But he scored or created a goal every 115 minutes. So Engels is doing just fine. And what a delivery that was to Kyogo. Does he start at Ibrox for you?
Beautiful.
Well, you said that the starting 11 remains, yeah?
Well,
other than Callum.
Other than Callum, yeah, aye. And we'll get to the forwards in a minute because obviously Dyson starts as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought Engels has done more than enough in the last 2 games to justify a start. So for me, it's McGregor, it's Engels, and then there's a debate to be had whether it's Bernardo or Hatate, but I would go with Hatate because I think Bernardo is better at coming on into a game and shoring things up in midfield, and you can swap him out for Engels or Hatate and he'll come in and fulfill the role because Bernardo is one of our most adaptable players because actually God forbid if McGregor got injured, Bernardo could even come on and fill in that role as well. He'll play wherever he's needed, and that's a great bit of versatility to have.
He's an amazing asset. You're right. I mean, nothing would surprise me, I've got to say, beyond Callum McGregor starting that game. Nothing would surprise me about the other two. It could be a permutation of any of them. Maybe McCowan. I would be surprised if McCowan starts the game. But I could understand why he would start the game. But it would surprise me at this stage when you look at the form of Bernardo and Engels and you look at the form and mainly the ability of Hatate to create chances and make something happen in a game like this. So I'm going to start with McGregor, Engels and Hatate. I agree with you on that one, but I feel that Bernardo's been a wee bit hard done by, but just the game that we're going into, I think that suits this particular match. Let us know in the comments section, what's your 3 midfield players to start at Ibrox? And also, who do you play at left back? I'm not even going to throw out the centre-half debate because I don't think it is a debate. I think Scalesy and Carter Vickers start, and there's no argument about it. But who starts at left back? Who starts in the midfield? And we'll move up to the top of the team. And Kyogo getting back in amongst the goals for me in this game, even if he hadn't scored 2 at the weekend, Liam, he starts against Rangers. He just seems to have that knack. He's stepping up in games like this. So he starts, and he'll be flanked by Maeda and Kuhn. And I think the 2 wingers are the 2 most important players on the park for us.
That front 3 is, if you're a Rangers fan, thank God I'm not, that is nightmare fuel. That is the stuff of nightmares because, Maeda just utterly terrorises Tavernier, and they don't know where to go with Kyogo because if they go one way, Kyogo goes another, and Kuhn is probably our best player at the moment, just overall, and it's a great that front 3, much like the centre of defence. I don't think there's a debate there. I think that front 3 picks itself.
Yeah, and you're right. It is frightening. It's a great, for me, it's a great asset for Brendan Rodgers to have that. And when you look at how it was built, made in Japan with Maeda and Kyogo, brought to us by Ange Postecoglou, and then Kuhn, a player who came under intense scrutiny in his first 6 months at the football club, but he's got 25 goals and assists in 25 games. The chances are he will tear it up. And there was an interesting comment came in here actually with regards to the way that Rangers are going to approach this game. Martin from Belfast says, I can see a really aggressive, brutal approach to shake us up. Kuhn was given preferential treatment and they high-fived after a tackle from behind, which should have been a straight red. I agree with that, and I think sometimes it's the only way they can stop us, Liam. And it concerns me a wee bit because they got away with that in the cup final. All the focus was on Scalesy, pulling a jersey. But Kuhn missed the following game and a half as a result of that particular challenge.
Aye, it's that is a concern. That's the one variable that we can't account for, is will the referee be intimidated by their gamesmanship and by the the hordes in the stands. Although, if word is to be believed, I have, much to my own amusement, I've watched a few Rangers fan podcasts in the last few days, and a lot of them are talking about no going to the game because they see no point in it.
Wow.
I mean, it would be funny if I don't see it happening, but see if they got like 25,000 to a crowd or something, it would be, even if we didn't win the game, it would be worth it just for that.
The backfiring of not allowing Celtic fans in your stadium. James Cormack would start Schmeichel, Johnson, Carter Vickers, Scales and Taylor, Hatate, Kalmack and Engels, Maida, Kyogo and Kuhn. That's very close to the team I would start, I've got to say. And I think that my only question mark at the moment is around the left back.
Aye, Taylor's the only one I would switch out of that as well.
Yeah, that's the question mark. But James, thank you throughout 2024 for supporting the channel. Thank every single one of you for doing that. Another 1,700 plus live on the live stream on this Tuesday afternoon. It is New Year's Eve, and however you're going to celebrate it, we've got Liam there over in Japan. I know that people tune in from all over the world. Have a phenomenal time with your loved ones, and let's go into 2025 stronger and more positive, and we'll have a really successful time over the next 12 months. Thanks everybody for getting involved. And you know what? If I get an opportunity, I might even jump on tomorrow, but I'll let you know on the socials. Thanks for all your support throughout 2024, and join us again on a Celtic State of Mind.
All the best, everyone.